people want to buy God's love or buy God's acceptance. And in a culture where you hardly get anything good without manipulation, without giving, you hardly get anything good. Like, even say you buy clothes, you still feel compelled to pay the tailor for delivering on time. Did you understand? You got a good parking space in a place where you're going to spend money. You still feel compelled to give the security man. Like, so when it now comes to God and God says, I've loved you freely, I've loved an everlasting love, you're like, no, I need to pay God. I need to pay God. And I think that those are some of the things that must change for the whole nation to change. Because as it is in that religious space, so it is in the political space. So you want to become the candidate of a certain party, right, where they are partying. So you want to be a part of the partying. So you put a part in, right, not just a parting of your hair, right, but you want to partake of. Oh, so sorry. How dare we exclude you from the conversation? Okay. Right. And then guess what happens? You still have to pay. So let's talk about that. Today we're supposed to talk about transformation by the word, right? So we'll still get to talking about the word and how that transforms, but it's such a burden on my heart. Like, there has to be a way. And Jesus did that in his day. Jesus just went countercultural. He still went to the synagogue, so there's still a place for the synagogue in quotes, right? That's why I'm speaking about the organization. It must still be organized. It must still be so let's look at the NSAS, for example. It was still organized, and that's actually how come it could last as long as it did. People give towards it. So there was organization. But I think it needs to go beyond protest. It needs to get into pre-test, into pre-exams. By protest, I think that people react a lot when something has now happened, right? And I'm not just being political, I'm just saying even spiritually. How do we organize ourselves outside of organized religion that has not helped the country? Like, it hasn't really helped a lot of people. It has benefited some people, right? But in terms of transformation, it was Rosamond that was saying during the reviews earlier. So she just went to Europe and went around a couple of countries in Europe. And so part of where she went to were all the sites where the disciples were imprisoned. And she was describing that there's a hole that leads into. Did you go? What's the name of that? Is it Jagun Jagun? The movie where that Jagun Jagun movie, right? The Femi Adebayo movie. So you know that place where they kept those guys inside the hole, inside the floor, like a dungeon. So many times when we think about Paul and Silas, the parade in the prison, you're giving it some postmodern embellishments. You think it's like Airbnb where they put Nigerian politicians after they're probing them for corruption. But these jails that they were in were not comfy at all. Must have been gnats and flies and spiders and cobwebs and no lights, rats, poop, whatever, smelly. But there was a commitment that was so ingrained into them that they still wrote letters inside that jail over what they believed. Now, my pain, and Master Life and all of us spoken about how disciples died. Many Nigerian believers cannot even give up their money for their neighbors. So, how do we change that without compromise? Because part of why we need to have this conversation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they don't have respect for all these things. So they don't have respect for So if you're going to reach that generation, you must have the heart, not just the art. So tell me, why do you do what you do? This house fellowship, why do you like it? Did you grow up in church? Did something happen in church? Or have you never been in church?
Like my like where I grew up in church. Oh, interesting. Okay. So where I grew up in church, like um, it was church, but we're like a larger group than what we have here. And the reason I go here is because we sort of have the same we have the same vision and beliefs. So I've been like I grew up in church also. I grew up in church. It's well, I would say when I use the term organized, I'll use organized like in it's not a house. Yes, it's not a house. So I grew up in church, and the reason I still go here is because I appreciate the I appreciate the intimacy and the simpleness of the fellowship. Not to spite anybody or anyone, but I have a problem with organized church that's like I grew up I've been to traditional church. I went to Covenant University, so I know what church is like, and I've been to other churches. But the reason I am still where I am is because I've come to understand that fellowshipping with other believers is about communal. It's about communal engagement. It's not about listening to a preacher. It's about feeding off of one another, like what we're doing now. But the thing is, most churches have this on weekdays, and then they have like that on Sunday. But I'm coming to understand, and even like seeing what seeing how like the disciples and the apostles in their times, how they fellowshipped was fellowship. Like it's not it was more about the body feeding off each other, like Timothy serving with Paul.